look forward to learning about. Want to play a game?
Amazed you know, oh, hello. Now it's me talking. Hi.
All right.
Well, I put enough coins in this thing, so. Interesting thing about me, that's me, John O'Neill. Hello. Class of 96 on the extended 6-year program. Did a lot of co-oping, actually started in the game industry, not at Sparkplug Games. In 94, actually joined a company called Microprose Software, if anyone's heard of Microprose. Anyone heard of Microprose? Sid Meier? Funny story that might hit that. If you've played Civilization, Colonization, any of those really old, early games that existed, some of these are lies, they're not true. But I do love making video games. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, obviously games came to mind. You know, I do talk about games quite often, not just from the playing experience, but why I chose to get into them. Because in 96, the computer science department here, we didn't have a game concentration course. There was a graphics course, which I took, and I passed. There was an advanced graphics course, which I did not take, because at that time I joined the game industry. And so there's many things over the years that I've talked about, particularly to people like you, students who are interested in getting in the game industry, run screaming. And those who are just curious about the game industry. But it's a wonderful thing to know because games don't just mean building video games anymore. Yes, I do love making games, so let's play. Come on, you've got to know where that's from. I'm so dating myself here. Anyone know where that's from? Thank you, yes. Let's pick some games here. So, you know, some really fantastic games that existed before video games. As a species, we've been playing games for thousands of years. Anyone ever played Go? Not like driving. Go, yes. Actually, one of the first mobile games that we did for the smartphone. Took a chance, you know, didn't follow the trend, and we charged $10 for a very competitive Go game on the App Store. It did pretty well. It's still up there, I think. Not $10, maybe it's $5. But, you know, I played a lot of these games, maybe not that one. Pac-Man's interesting. And getting started, you know, the reasons, you know, how I got into the industry, it's not a story about playing lots of video games. I did play video games, played quite a few. In fact, I skipped, yeah, it told on me there, you know, for research purposes only, I did skip some of my classes while here. But I love playing games. That was not the reason why I started making video games. What I really enjoy is a challenge. I hate getting bored. And in the 20 years, mathematically, 19 years since graduating, the majority of the time I have spent actually building video games in some shape or form. But again, I know it's not to shatter the reality of doing it because it's passion and indie and art form. You know, it's a challenge, it's fun. I find it always something new. You know, a couple of people I actually was speaking with earlier today in the library, and they asked, you know, a typical day or what I do, you know, and every day is different. And that's something that I discovered, you know, while being in the industry, you're always going to be challenging yourself. In fact, my entrance to the industry was a successful answer to a Monty Python question. Favorite color? Red. And I'm not going to say the other part. But it really was. Ooh, look, he works too. The video game industry has been around, 30 plus years, but it's always been very chaotic. You know, it doesn't always follow business reasoning. Still doesn't to this day. There are large companies that have gone public, which I'll say, Zynga, excuse me, that don't make video games, but they monetize on analytics. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, some of you have maybe been to some of the classes I taught where I kind of go on a tirade about companies that enter the game industry not for the sake of making games. But make no mistake, I am in the business of video games to make money. It's not a bad thing. I'm running a business. If I don't make money, I don't get to keep doing what I love doing. So that's something I was trying to discover when I first started video games. In the beginning, it was all about writing code and proving your worth. We didn't use technology. You didn't share code between companies. Epic was just getting started up in Maryland. But everyone wrote code from scratch to prove your worth as a video game developer. And that's pretty insane. Yeah. Anyone play this game? Yes, me too. Oh, not quite. That's Michael Bay style, actually. So, one thing that became very obvious to me after the first couple of years of being in the industry and going through my first layoff was that it couldn't just be about writing code. I worked with some very talented people, all of them gifted programmers, but it was not just about coding and the level of kung fu that you could have in code. You know, in many ways, you discover that a consumer could care less how fancy the code is. It's not about the code. In many ways, it's about not writing code. Less is more. If I'd known then what I know now, there's a lot of things I would have done differently, and that's one of the things I do like to talk about quite a bit, because especially as a software engineer and not a coder, you know, learning how to develop, learning when not to write code. So if you're not writing it, you're not testing it, you're not debugging it, you're not maintaining it. It's not breaking, it's not keeping you up till 1 o'clock in the morning the night before you ship, and then having to kick it out a few weeks later because you're still late. The other thing that's really interesting, again, in the beginning as a developer and predominantly with a focus of writing code, is that all you think about is code. And that kept me back for many years until I realized, well, there's other people making games and they don't know how to write code. But I'm fairly good at talking to people. Sometimes I can't stop. Hopefully today I will, so that y'all can ask questions too. But one of the skills that I discovered, you know, in doing the development was learning what other people are doing in other disciplines. You know, trying to make things easier on other people. I'm talking about artists, designers, marketing, business, QA. You know, people who still interact with development, but they don't necessarily do the same thing you do. Those soft skills are critical. I'll get back to that in a few minutes, hopefully, but that, more than anything else, is the reason why nearly 8 years later we are still in business. And I won't give away some of the things we do until then, you may already know. But it's not about the great games we write, it's about the relationships that we build. And funny story along those lines, related to the code development, getting back to civilization. So Sid Meier founded a company called Microprose in the early 80s. Fantastic designer, not a software developer. And so me being a junior programmer, trying to prove my worth, going through these mountains of codes and for loops and variable statements, declarations like I, IIJ, and then about 1,000 lines later using those variables. And if you haven't done coding, that's really frustrating because you don't know what in the world this person is trying to do. So I'm reading through all this code and it's like, oh, this Sid person in the comments, he's an idiot. What is this stuff? Why is he so inefficient? And so a few weeks later, the team flies up to Hunt Valley, Maryland, where the company is doing a bit of a discussion about our latest game, which is Colonization for Windows. And I get a chance to meet Sid Meier. And my lead programmer is kind of standing next to me, and he's like, you know, you should talk to Sid about, you know, what you think about his code. I was like, I'm going to tell Sid what I think about his code. I'm going to prove. And I am kind of looking around. They're all kind of staring at me and laughing a little bit, and like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. It's like, Sid Meier, yeah, that seems like a pretty important person. He's like, yeah, you're important, aren't you? It's like, yeah, I kind of founded the company. Like, am I fired? Like, no. And Sid told me something that has stuck to me to this day. He won't remember it, fortunately. But he told me that he uses code as a way to prototype an idea. Again, the user experience is what matters. The user's not going to know what the code looks like. Not saying that code is not important. He wasn't saying that at all. But the experience that you're trying to convey in creating through intricately weaved coding patterns. You know, this is the wonder of what a programmer and an engineer will enjoy. The user just wants to have fun in the case of games. And so for him, he uses coding as a tool. And he was the first to admit that he's a horrific programmer. He didn't really say sorry for us having to rewrite sections of it for the sequel, but that's something that's very important to remember. You know, code is something you're going to be working with. It doesn't matter what language, it doesn't matter what tool. Never forget, you know, the end experience is going to look differently than what you're working with. Now, that's not to say organization's not important, coding style, because if you have other people working with you, they're not going to be happy if you're not a good coder, like me and Sid. So yes, this is where you really should run screaming if you're thinking about the game industry. A couple years ago, I would talk about the game industry and the passion of getting into the industry and doing what you love. And that's something that I've actually come back to. I was thinking, you know, very heavily over the last year, you know, saying, you know, do what you love and love what you do. And I really think that's wrong. Do what you're good at. Hopefully you find what you're good at and become passionate about that. I meet so many people who love playing games and they think they want to be in the game industry. That is not the right approach. It's not to say you can't learn about how games are developed, because there are numerous industries that rely on the technology that we use. Us as a company right now, it baffles me that more game development studios don't take advantage of the amazing technology that we have at our disposal, the platforms that we distribute to, the time that we get things done, and sometimes the budgets that we actually get. More often than not, they're not that high. But the use of gaming technology, now more than ever, is spreading out everywhere. So, you know, we talk about things that we do in games. 60 some odd products is a small development studio that's been around for 8 years. Of those 60 products, you know, 30 to 40 of them are things that you will never ever see, because they were products for companies like little places, IBM, the US government, state of North Carolina, Raytheon, Salesforce.com, Cisco, Microsoft. They hire us as game developers to leverage technology to create interactive experiences. We call them games, they call them training, for the immersion, for the interaction. It's an enormous potential, not really for a new industry, but for all industries. And I think the difficulty that a lot of game studios and game developers who do this professionally have is that it's not fun. But the balance of doing what you have to do what you want to do as a business is very strong when you're paying the bills every other week. And so that's something that we have done extremely well and continue to do on purpose, because we can use all the knowledge and expertise we continuously refine as game developers. And so if you're interested in game development, but you don't think you want to do game development, that doesn't mean you can't use the game development. I'm going to say games a lot. I talked about this a little bit too, the concept of becoming a developer and not a coder. A developer is going to find a solution to a problem and not just write code haphazardly. I'm guilty of it with Sid, jumping right in and coding my way into a box. And today, it's incredible the number of tools that we use. Our team is smaller now than any team I've worked with in the past over the last 19 years. And yet we build products that are immensely larger because we're developers, not coders. We use tools and technology as solutions and not just build code. This is my favorite one, now level 4 too, and how to keep flying. One thing that I wish I'd realized when I founded the company was the balance between technologists and non-technologists. My co-founder is classically trained in art. He understands color theory, layout, design. He yells at me when I use full RGB red for anything we do in UI. Which I don't see a problem with it. I know it's red, it's my favorite color. If he doesn't get it, that's okay. But the balance between running a business, staying sane, keep flying, I know I'm really good at coming up with solutions to problems from a technology perspective. I'm very bad at drawing things. I'm very bad at laying things out in a UI. So I find a balance with other people who can keep me sane, so I'm not trying to do everything. One thing as a small business owner, you're often having to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. And so, good old Rocky Balboa, which for a long time I didn't realize he actually wrote the script, so go Sylvester Stallone. It's something that was said in one of the movies, which I hold very true to maintaining and persisting. It's not about how hard you hit, but about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Of those 60-ish products that we've developed, I probably had twice as many canceled on us. Even of those 60, the amount of budgets that were cut, time scales changed, employees that have come and left, I can't even record that. But we drive forward. This is an area of chaos in the game industry that is very common and something that you have to be very aware of before you say, I want to build games for a living. It's not that it's untrue in other industries. I just know it personally because I've dealt with it. As an employee going through layoffs, as a business owner having to lay off. What do you do when you don't have a budget coming in? I still want to keep making games. I still want to build products. I still want to continue prospering somehow, but you have to make hard choices. And so for all disciplines, again, not particular to computer science, it's understanding what you're getting into before you get into it. Games can be fun, but they're really hard to make. Anyone used Unity? Heard of Unity? The democratization of game development. Bull. The democratization of learning how to do game development, yes. It's not pick up a tool and build the next Flappy Birds. Or Crossy Road. Or any other success story that you conveniently hear about through well-placed PR and marketing. Think about it. If it were that easy, wouldn't everyone be doing it? So know what you're getting into before you get into it. I'm not saying don't go into games, but go in knowing what to expect. I'll talk about Firefly in a second, because it's not a lucky thing, it is a very shiny thing. And yeah, a little formula that my producer always teases me about, our schedules are more like guidelines than requirements. Because how do you ship a product that's not fun when you have consumers who are expecting to play and give you money for it? We tried free-to-play games. You're familiar with it, Candy Crush. We're terrible at them, and we typically won't do them. The experience I've had over the years has been building products that have a design, an implementation, a ship, a support, a maintain phase. And that's what we're good at. Again, knowing what you're good at. I do not take on a lot of work from other clients anymore because, in all honesty, we'd love to be building things that we know targeting a consumer audience that we focus on, which is one of the ending points I definitely want to add. Oh, it's not over yet. Anyone have coins? Want to continue? Funny thing, couple things that I'm often asked, having an exit strategy. What's your exit strategy? What are you going to do? How are you going to sell off? And especially when we're interacting with clients and companies in California. And for a long time, I didn't know what they were asking. I was like, well, I'm a pretty healthy guy, and I expect to be around for a while, but eventually I'm going to die. That's my exit strategy. And they kind of look like, no, really? It's like, why? Is there something you know that I don't? But it really is. I found something I'm passionate about and I'm good at doing. I don't ever see doing anything else because I can build games, I can build products that leverage games, and I'm good at it, and the team I have with me now is good at it. I've talked about knowing what you're getting into. This is true in everything. Do it because you're good at it. You cannot please everyone. Again, product development, that's true. Requirements docs, knowing your target audience. In games, there's so many people who try to pursue the general consumer audience, and they fail horribly because you don't know your audience. Again, there's some fantastic companies that do data analytics, Zynga, King. They're chasing numbers. They're not chasing an audience. They want as many people as possible to invest money in this cycle, which I'll lightly call a game. That's not what we do anymore. We were fortunate 2 years ago to land a fairly large deal with a very passionate audience based on Joss Whedon's Firefly license. Anyone watch Firefly? Anyone a crazy fan? Do I need to be careful? Because there's about 10 million of them. If you're not familiar with it, get out. Or go to Netflix tonight and watch the entire first series. Oh, and there's only one. I killed it for you. Sorry. It's actually still really good. Wonderful series. Over 11 years ago, it was canceled by a certain network, Fox, who, amazingly, they're a wonderful partner. But they didn't come to us directly. About 2 years ago, they were speaking to another LA studio that dealt with collectible products, had nothing to do with games whatsoever. And they asked this company, it's like, we're thinking it might be time to do a video game based on Firefly because the fans have been wanting it because there's been nothing else since the movie that happened 10 years ago plus. Maybe we should do this. And so the owner of this other company said to Fox, I was like, well, I don't know anything about games. Let me find someone who can advise us on how to proceed. So again, soft skills, a relationship that I had built with a certain company called NBC. We've done them some favors in recommending what not to do in pursuing games, not hiring us to do something they asked us to do, being very honest about our abilities, but also the abilities of what a game development studio should be capable of doing in a short amount of time. I think they still did end up pursuing it with another group that failed. But that honesty, integrity, and soft skill relationship management is what ultimately led an introduction to happen between NBC, ourselves, Fox, and this other company. Now, Firefly is a massive multi-million-dollar brand that's been maintained by millions of fans. The amount of responsibility should have scared any sane person out of their wits. I said, sure, that sounds fun, let's do it. Why not? But it was that attitude, that carefree, sure, it sounds like something interesting that has an audience that I know we can build something great for. 2 years ago, we were delayed once because of the actors. I won't blame Nathan, he's a great guy, but it's still the actor's fault, not mine. That schedule thing, remember, very important. But again, we landed that because we were tiny, because we were honest, because we were passionate, and because we were good at building games. People ask me what my most successful game is. I don't have a good answer because we don't have a clear definition of success. If you're looking for revenue, we did a game based on the White House 6 years ago that's made over $1.5 million. For someone else. So successful-ish, yes. For us, not really. Although we can talk about, the amount of effort we put into it, the money we got to build it. It was profitable for what we were given, very successful financially on the return, but I don't brag about the White House game as being our big success. Firefly is extremely exciting to us because we're focusing on that target audience and knowing who we are building it for. Anyone play games on Steam? I don't care about you. Sorry. You can play it. I don't care. The fans, first and foremost, we're very honest about the fact they are our audience. Gamers should like it too. Gamers will complain about it, and the Firefly fans will hunt you down. I've seen it. They will hunt you down and yell at you. And I will just say, hey, fans are awesome, yeah. So, for us, again, we put ourselves in a very good situation that's not driven by luck. Sometimes it's driven by insanity, but mostly it's driven by knowing what we do really, really, really well. So, find what you can do. Find what you're good at. Hopefully that aligns with what's fun. I think I have another coin. No! Oh, I've already killed him though, sorry. So, amazingly, I didn't talk the entire time. I would love to answer questions, talk more about what we're doing as a business, anything with our games. I think we're doing microphones.
So if you have a question, if you'll raise your hand, we have a couple of our ambassadors and they'll get a microphone. Hold your question until you actually get the mic in front of you so we can capture it on video.
Hi. Hi. What is a good way to make money on the side while you're building a game project?
So what's a good way to make money on the side while you're building a game project? Are you talking about starting like an independent studio with a small number of people? And the focus you want to do eventually is build games.
Yes.
So do something that you're good at that doesn't have anything to do with games. Or find a way to use, again, it's that leveraging of expertise. Are you familiar with Unreal, Unity?
Yeah.
So one thing that I found fascinating is the number of companies that will not invest internally in technologists who know game development because it's games. It's the classic thing with us was Raytheon. I can say it because they didn't sign an NDA, which, woohoo! So, Raytheon wanted us to build an interactive learning simulation to help train FAA pilots how to vector planes. It's like, well, that sounds like a game called Flight Control. We love that game. It's like, no, it's not a game. You're not building games. You're using technology to build interactive learning. And so, ultimately, we were leveraging what we did as a game developer to build something for a client who knew they wanted a game without calling it a game. But it was one client, one audience, not building for consumers, not trying to figure out how to market something to a mobile audience. So one of the things I would recommend, I recommend to as many people who can get their hands on technology as possible, is find a way to master that technology and use it for a client's needs. Because they're looking for people to do that. I think, speculating, I think in the next couple of years you will start seeing large corporations hiring internally to specialize people who can use gaming technology, because gaming is becoming more acceptable. 80s and 90s, games were, oh, boys play games. Now everyone plays games. I've seen people driving cars playing games. That's bad. You should not do that. Not me. I'm just saying. They stop at the light and they're not even texting. They're doing a little thing. It's like, that's just so bad. So that's one area. The other thing, too, there's nothing wrong from an independent or a hobbyist, those aren't bad words, to develop games for yourself experimentally and releasing those to see how an audience reacts. Finding a safe and stable revenue-generating job that can allow you to do what you want to do and to see if you're really good at it. So there are, I don't know how many thousands of new apps that are released daily. All these apps are trying to vie for consumer attention, and a lot of them are trying to make money to, like I said, continue sustaining a company to allow them to continue building games. If you don't have to have that hanging over your shoulders, the freedom and flexibility you're given to experiment and not rely on revenue from a product going to a very fickle, Twitter-based reaction on a mobile device, which has a low barrier to entry, which is wonderful, but a high, extremely high wall to revenue generation. Now, as long as your expectations are kept in check, where you're not expecting to make tons of money, I don't think you'll be let down. And then, if you're the random lottery ticket that does do the next Flappy Birds, remember me. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So you talk about maximizing leveraging your expertise and doing what you're good at. Have you ever feel that, like in some moments, that a company or person have to learn something new to renew itself so that they can face the new things evolve in the market? And how to decide, like, do I keep the old things that still generate a lot of revenue, and then, or I should switch the directions to go to the new market or things like that? So
That's a wonderful question, and actually, I think it's a point that I probably glossed over or completely missed because I was playing Galaga. One of the things that we, and I in particular, have had to do, passion breeds innovation, but necessity also breeds innovation. We're a tiny group, tiny budget, terrible deadlines. In business, cheaper, faster, better, right? How many do you pick? 2? No, pick 1. Game industry gets 1. So If we don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't really want to be cheap because then we can't keep getting the business. And so the innovations that are driven in the way we use tools is not because we think, what kind of neat things can we do with this? It's often, I've got to send something to our client tomorrow. I need to find a solution right now that works. And so it's almost the panic mode of creation. The number of times, the first time it happened, it was like, okay, whew, we did it. You know, the next 10 times was, okay, I really would like to stop doing this, but okay, we can do it. And we did it again and again and again. And so a particular example I'll give you real quick. In a certain game that we're doing right now, we leveraged, all of our expertise is based on the Unity engine. We are experts at everything having to do with developing products in Unity. Games, serious games, simulations, marketing applications, training onboard solutions, web-based designs. We use it for everything. This presentation, all built in Unity. I hate PowerPoint. I don't use PowerPoint. Sorry, Microsoft. But it's easy. It's something we know that we're really, really, really good at. And so when we push the bounds, the limits of building something through necessity and not because of innovation, we end up discovering that we build really elegant solutions using as little code as possible because our deadlines are astronomically insane. And so the innovation is driven by the insanity. Oh, that's nuts. It's not a great thing, but it's what we do. And we're not alone in the game industry in doing that. Another thing that I kind of love is that we're always in this industry pushing the bounds of technology. We are pushing hardware to its limits, making machines overload, video cards not explode, but they melt. We're always trying to do more and more for the sake of fun. And fun is what's driving us. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's a good and right answer, but we have no funding. We were not started with $10 million of seed capital. We were started with my 401k, which is gone now, but that's okay. Kind of burn the bridge, and what you're left with is you'll find that you can actually, if you're up for it, if you find the passion and drive, and I have a lot of people who've done it, and I have a lot of people who haven't been able to do it. So it kind of gets back to that, know what you're getting into. If you are able to deal with that stress, you might create wonders. We do. The things we've done, getting back to the Unity example, there's things that we've created, which even Unity looks at and goes, I didn't know our engine could do that. And I naturally say, well, if you want to buy us, I'm not interested. Hi.
I can talk pretty loud.
Me too.
Sparkplug. Sure.
Actually, I think we need
Oh, right.
to use the microphone.
For the recording, got it. So you said your team over at Sparkplug is pretty small. Did it get small or start small, and why?
Both. 42, yes. So the team, it was interesting. It started as two, myself and my co-founder, Ben Licious, who I worked with at Vicious Cycle Software. He was the art director for many years, and I got to know him, and we had a very positive, energetic working relationship, and something I talked about where I didn't realize that until many years later, how critical that was. I always knew, the reason starting a business is because I'm a horrible employee, and I can make the mistakes just as well as the people I was working for, so why not? But getting to the core of having fun, meant that we had to do things a little bit smaller than some of the products that we were working on together previously. We were doing exclusive console games, multi-platform, 12 to 18-month schedules, which, they got pretty rough. Crunch is not really something I debate on because I love what I do and I don't really measure the hours. I tried to jot down like an average day, and each day over the last 2 weeks has been completely different, so it would have been garbage. But when we started, it was important to find other people who had that same understanding. Not just passion. Passion's critical, but the understanding of what we were trying to do, which was getting back to making fun games for both ourselves as well as for consumers so that we could sustain a business. But we were still getting started. 2008 was an awesome year for the economy. That 401k went really fast. And we grew to the point where we were chasing work for hire. So we landed our first official gig with a company you may have heard of, Dairy Queen. They're a big game publisher out in Canton now. There used to be one up the road on Western, but it's gone. Oh. But they reached out. They found us through a random listing, again, business relationships, like, hey, have you ever played Diner Dash? I said, sure. Ben, what's Diner Dash? It's like, I don't know, it's a casual game. It's like, what's a casual game? I don't know. Like, they want to give us money to build one. Like, woohoo, yeah, we play Diner Dash. So, we grew out of the initial necessity before we really found our stride. We did silly things like we built our own engine. We chased work for hire, not necessarily the bad thing, but we chased work for hire with the clients we were already working with, which meant we were kind of in a continuous cycle, a vicious cycle, where, that's so bad, where we couldn't break out and try doing things that we wanted to do experimentally. And so the team grew from 2 to 4 up to 15 internally, full time. And then it all imploded with those products that we talked about that did lose budget, got canceled, shifted, and that was hard. Having to let someone go, not fire someone, but having to let someone go, that really stunk. I hate doing that. I do it more now, not just because of budgets, because of people who shouldn't be in the game industry. It's tough, but it's better if I'm honest with you than I let you kind of run carefree, stumbling in the dark, and having everyone fail. It's one of those things as a business owner that you hate having to do, but it's more critical, I think, than most of the happy times. When the team is celebrating success, they celebrate. When it's tough, that's my decision. That's something I have to carry the burden for. So I threw in so many other things to explain, and I'll keep going over and over. But yeah, we went up, went down, went up, went down. Now we're about 10 full-time, and then 15 around the world. We are an international corporation bent on world dominance. No.
So I was curious as to how you would recommend that a small fledgling business find an audience.
What industry?
Um,
You're going to say it, aren't you?
Well,
Say games.
games.
Game industry.
that one.
Well, yeah, I'll definitely say that that's probably the hardest part, harder in many ways than building a product. We did a Kickstarter over a year ago for one of our games, not necessarily to raise additional funding to finish the game, but more so to identify the market, to identify who was interested in playing the game. And they paid us to tell us that. It's great. We add a lot of cool stuff to the game as a result. But we discovered, initially our thoughts in this particular product by talking to consumers. What do you think about this? Is this something of interest to you on this platform or that platform, this style, that style? And they told us very, very quickly, what they were most interested in. So in this case, it was identified to be a console product. So as a small company, I said, console product. Okay, I'm not going to compete with Activision, EA, nor do I want to. I'm not going to give them a percentage of my revenue. Not that they're bad, but I'm stingy and I don't want them to have my revenue. And so instead, the way we approached it in this particular game was we partnered with a company like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft. It's amazing the amount of information and audience that companies like that will give you if you're not asking them for money. Because think about it. Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, they don't just sell products. They sell hardware. And typically their hardware is sold, except for Nintendo's case, at a loss. In some cases, a big loss. And so it's extremely important to those companies in particular to make them money through licensing, because they get a little chunk of every game that's sold on their official platform, PlayStation Network in this case with Sony. So they want more good products. And if they don't have to give a developer money, but instead they can help bring an audience to you or give you marketing and PR, they're already doing that anyway. And so again, I could look at investing $100,000 to $200,000 in a marketing campaign that I can't afford to do. Or I can call up a friend at Sony and say, got an awesome game that I know your audience has already told me they're interested in. All I'm asking for is you to help. I don't want money, but I want you to talk about it. I want you to help include us when we're going out and promoting this game. And so that's great. Console is honestly easier. If you're looking at building a product predominantly for mobile, I would steer clear. You know, if the only thing you're looking at is mobile, you're facing a massive uphill battle. Not necessarily because of the amount of products that are released or even the amount of products that are out there, but think about mobile games. How long do people spend playing mobile games at one time? 30 seconds, 60 seconds, a minute? They're throwaway. They're quick, easy, consumable. It's not even talking about the money and they invest in it, but just the engagement. So that is one of the biggest reasons why we don't approach mobile games anymore, because we want to build a product that a target consumer is engaged with, something that they want to continue playing. And that's really, really, really hard to do with mobile because of the nature of the hardware, not because of the nature of the game. You're building a mobile game, aren't you? Oh, thank goodness. I was going to feel really bad there at the end. I absolutely will, and that's the next thing you do. You have 40 plus companies in this area that do what we do, game development. And it's amazing how willing these companies are to share knowledge, opinions, right or wrong, and they're here, and they want to help. Most of them. I do, at least, okay.
So this may be slightly inclusive as a question. I'm sure you guys follow the game development conference and what happened this past week, but I actually want to take a step back to 2014 and talk about Ken Levine's approach to the idea of the open world adaptive game design. And I don't know if you watched the conference, but what he said was the idea with the NPC and the philosophy behind the player engagement was that once interacting with an NPC, they'll remember you, and the game world shapes to your decisions. Not just you interact once with them, you get a response, and you leave that area. That the game world evolves from that interaction, and there's different branches that could take. How do you see that as the future for game development, especially
You stole that
with,
idea from me.
Yeah. I mean, especially
totally
with like VR coming around, and especially with kind of like Valve announced with their HTC partnership with the new kind of their spin-off of the Oculus Rift. How do you see that as part of the next wave of game development?
Two different questions, but I'll
Yeah,
hit them
kind
both
of.
because they're kind of fun. No, Ken's a really smart person. And again, if you have the resources where you can build something at that scale, and you're building something that is meant to be immersive and has an extremely long tail in engagement, kind of like what we're doing with Firefly. Kind of like what his idea that we came up with before he did. No, I won't blame him. But it's interesting, the technology that we have available now allows us to save information anywhere, in the cloud, just the internet, run our games virtually anywhere between tablet, smartphone, PC, console, headsets, Commodore 64s, yes, Atari 2600 if you have one working. So it's not so much a matter of should you do it, it's can you do it. Can you do it from the sense of, is that what you're trying to build? I can't play anymore, I lost my quarter. Think about this. This is I won't call it the negative side, but it's the balance to doing an approach like that. I love the idea of that if you have the time to invest in building it and maintaining it. Maintaining it is key. Running the servers, debugging it, feeding users with new content, because I haven't met a Turing test yet that completely wins on fun. I haven't met a Turing test that can fool a person, but on the fun factor. So an NPC design that allows completely random but still predictable, looks like a human, not quite a human. You know, an NPC interaction is important, but you still need people playing the game to let it evolve. And so our answer to that, as long as users are continuing to invest to a point where the game is sustainable, meaning it's a subscription-based game, it's, you know, products are being bought, the infrastructure requirements to maintain a product like that is very, very high. It's probably one of the biggest things we fear with doing Firefly. because the approach is the same. You know, NPCs have memory. You can hire and fire them. They can quit. They don't die necessarily unless you shoot them accidentally. I'm not saying you should, but don't. That's bad. But when they move off and get hired by another captain, the memory is available. So Captain Tight Pants here, you know, didn't treat Jane very well, so Jane goes over and works for someone else who says that Captain Tight Pants is a real jerk. I know he's going to be on Ariel next week. Let's go with a vengeance mission. It's very simple, but it's still driven by the player. So we found a way to do it in as simple an approach as possible without having to have a massive team of people maintaining that content. So if you can do it, yes. But don't forget the maintenance side. The maintenance side is critical and could actually put the game under. You know, there's so many games that people play online that you get so frustrated when, oh, EA's got to shut down the server. Well, EA's evil, but whatever. You know, another company who shuts down a server, you know, because the cost is extremely expensive. You know, we haven't even released our game yet. We're already paying thousands of dollars in server maintenance. That scares me a little bit. I depend on our audience. We know our consumer. We know the crowd wants the game. But I'm still investing a tremendous amount now, hoping that the game can be sustainable. Not a really great business decision, but a risk that I'm willing to take because I know the audience will support it. If you don't have an audience to support that, I don't know if I'd release that as a one-off feature. Are you doing that in your game? Nope. Okay. And then HTC, yeah, wonderful, wonderful technology. You know, up until this year at GDC, I was always saying that virtual reality always seemed like a developer technologist toy. Some of the new things that are coming out now, I still think it's going to be technologist-centric because the price tag is pretty high. They don't put up official prices, but it's not going to be as cheap as some phones. You know, the Steam machines are going to be expensive as well. But the immersion factor is enormous. And I think with a well-designed, serious game, or interactive game, you know, they could take off. And take off only to the point where you still have people who are paying money for those type of high-end experiences. It's not something that everyone's going to walk around having a virtual headset and bumping into each other. It's just not there. When you have VR like, you know, Star Trek style, that's when it's cool. We're still years away from that, as far as I know.
One more question.
Make it a hard one.
If not, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.